Something explosive is unfolding inside the Cleveland Browns organization, and it's reaching a point where even veteran insiders are whispering that this might be the most chaotic quarterback situation the franchise has seen in years, and that's saying a lot for Cleveland. What started as a simple depth chart debate has spiraled into something much darker, a growing belief that Shedeur Sanders isn't just being overlooked, he's being actively held back. Rumors suggest internal clashes, personal grudges, and decisions driven by ego rather than football, painting a picture of a franchise more concerned with protecting fragile reputations than actually winning games. Fans can feel it, players can sense it, and the tension behind the scenes has reached a boiling point. And the more you look into what's really happening, the harder it becomes to ignore one unsettling question. Why does it seem like the Browns are terrified of letting Shedeur Sanders shine? Shedeur Sanders didn't walk into the NFL as some quiet late-round project that teams hoped would magically develop in the shadows. He arrived with the spotlight already blazing on him, a mix of raw talent, polished mechanics, and the kind of confidence that comes from growing up around greatness. Even before he stepped onto an NFL practice field, fans and analysts were already debating whether he had the potential to be the Browns' most naturally gifted young quarterback in years. The expectations weren't built on hype alone, they were shaped by years of watching him deliver under pressure in college, calmly making throws most rookies wouldn't even attempt, and carrying himself with the poise of a seasoned pro. From the moment Cleveland drafted him, there was an undeniable buzz across the fan base, the hope that maybe, finally, the franchise had stumbled upon a quarterback who didn't just check athletic boxes, but actually carried the intangible presence the Browns have been missing for decades. And even though he wasn't a first-round pick, the excitement around him felt strangely bigger than that. Rumors circulated that some teams had him graded higher than several quarterbacks who went early. And early camp reports claimed he looked far more polished than expected for a rookie stepping into the NFL spotlight. It wasn't unrealistic hype, it was genuine belief from people who had watched him up close. But with high expectations also comes a sense of inevitability. Fans believed and still believe that his rise is only a matter of time. Coaches and teammates reportedly felt it during early camp sessions when he made throws that drew quiet reactions from veterans. Even opposing teams took notice, with whispers suggesting that multiple franchises were hoping he'd slip far enough for them to take a shot. In Cleveland, people weren't asking if Shedeur would get his shot, they were asking when and what the team would look like once he finally stepped under center. And yet, despite all the energy and anticipation surrounding him, something felt off almost immediately. The excitement from fans didn't seem to translate into opportunities on the field. Instead of being treated as a promising young quarterback with clear upside, he quickly became the quiet conversation topic nobody inside the building wanted to address. That disconnect, the contrast between the expectations outside and the icy silence inside, set the stage for the growing tension that now surrounds every decision the Browns make. Because if a player arrives with this much potential, this much momentum, and this much belief from the people watching from the outside, the question naturally becomes, why hasn't he even been given a chance to prove it? From the outside, the Browns tried to present themselves as a stable, process-driven franchise, a team that follows structure, believes in development, and never makes emotional decisions. But once you look past the polished press conferences and controlled messaging, the internal setup looks far more fragile than the organization wants anyone to notice. Power inside the building isn't balanced, it's layered, political, and influenced heavily by personalities rather than performance.
Decisions aren't just made by the coaching staff. They're filtered through front office priorities, financial commitments, and lingering insecurities from past failures. And when it comes to the quarterback position, Cleveland's history has created an environment where every choice feels defensive instead of bold. Kevin Stefanski's system is built on predictability and minimizing risk, and that philosophy trickles down to every decision made at quarterback. Instead of embracing competition, the Browns have quietly built a hierarchy where certain players are protected, others are developed only on paper, and some, like Shedeur Sanders, are treated like long-term insurance policies rather than legitimate options. The organization's structure rewards the safe choice, even if that choice is underperforming, and punishes anything that might introduce pressure, outside attention, or uncomfortable debates. And for a franchise that has cycled through more quarterbacks than almost any other team in modern NFL history, that hesitation has turned into organizational paralysis. Then there's the shadow of the Deshaun Watson situation, a massive contract, a complicated public image, and injuries that have forced Cleveland to constantly juggle expectations with reality. The front office is still trying to justify that investment, even when the on-field results have made that almost impossible. Behind closed doors, Watson's presence looms over every quarterback conversation, shaping decisions even when he's not available to play. Add in the coaching staff's commitment to Dillon Gabriel, a player they hand-picked and staked their credibility on, and you end up with a setup where Shedeur isn't just competing for reps, he's competing with pride, money, and a coaching staff afraid of admitting they might have misjudged their own plan. This structure creates a domino effect. When the front office protects Watson, the coaching staff doubles down on Gabriel to avoid the appearance of instability. When Gabriel struggles, instead of reassessing, the organization tightens its grip even more to avoid embarrassment. In this setup, Shedeur becomes the one variable they can control by simply refusing to acknowledge him. It's easier for everyone involved to pretend he's not ready than to deal with what it might mean if he actually plays well. Because if he steps in and shows the talent fans believe he has, it exposes everything: the flawed evaluation, the misplaced loyalty, and the uncomfortable truth that the organization's structure is built more on ego than genuine competition. And that's why the organizational setup matters so much to the growing controversy. It reveals that the decisions being made about Shedeur aren't about football at all. They're about protecting reputations, avoiding accountability, and keeping a fragile hierarchy from collapsing under the weight of its own mistakes. But as the losses pile up and pressure continues to rise, the cracks in that foundation are starting to show, and the people inside the building can feel it. The setup that was supposed to keep things under control is now the very thing pushing the franchise toward a breaking point. From the moment the season began, something about the Browns' handling of Shedeur Sanders felt strangely off. Most rookie quarterbacks who sit on the bench are still treated as future investments, players the staff publicly praises, slowly integrates, and prepares for eventual opportunities. But Shedeur's situation has felt nothing like that. Instead of being positioned as a developing talent waiting for his shot, he's been kept at a distance, almost sealed away from meaningful discussion. And the longer this pattern continues, the more fans, analysts, and even some insiders have begun wondering whether Cleveland is genuinely developing him or quietly trying to bury him. Publicly, the messaging has been the same recycled script every week. He's progressing. We have a plan. Trust the process. But behind those vague phrases sits a glaring contradiction. If the plan
was truly about development, wouldn't he be getting situational reps? Wouldn't the coaching staff highlight his growth? Wouldn't competition at the most important position in football be openly encouraged? Instead, he's been kept on the sidelines while the struggling offense continues to sputter, and the coaching staff refuses to even entertain the possibility of giving him a chance. That silence has fueled speculation that the goal might not be to protect him, but to prevent him from shaking up the depth chart entirely. Rumors inside the building suggest that the decision regarding Shedeur wasn't made after watching him play. It may have been made long before the season even started. Reports claim that some staff members viewed him as a long-term project no matter what, meaning his position on the depth chart was fixed regardless of performance. If that's true, it means the evaluation process wasn't a process at all. It was a decision locked in before he even threw a preseason pass. And for a player with his talent, confidence, and natural presence, that kind of predetermined ceiling doesn't look like caution, it looks like suppression. What makes this situation even more puzzling is how the team reacts to his existence. Insiders have pointed out that the Browns rarely mention his name in press conferences, often talk around questions instead of answering them, and appear uncomfortable addressing anything related to his potential role. That level of avoidance has only intensified fan suspicion. When an organization refuses to acknowledge a player this openly, it doesn't feel like traditional benching, it feels intentional. And while no one inside the building will say that out loud, the pattern is impossible to ignore. Praise is scarce, opportunities are non-existent, and the message between the lines is painfully clear. Even players are reportedly feeling the tension. Some have quietly expressed confusion about why the team hasn't given Shedeur a chance, especially when they've watched him deliver sharp practices with poise and accuracy. But they also know the rules. Criticizing coaching decisions publicly is career suicide, so the frustration stays underground, spreading quietly among veterans who can see the difference in energy when he's on the field. For them, it's not about hype or favoritism, it's simply about what their eyes tell them. And what their eyes tell them is that the kid deserves at least a look. That's why this doesn't feel like a normal benching. Benching is temporary. Benching is flexible. Benching changes when circumstances change. What's happening with Shedeur feels far heavier. A refusal to evaluate him, a commitment to bury him beneath organizational priorities, and a fear of what his success might expose about their preferred quarterback choices. And as the season spirals and the controversy grows, the question becomes harder to ignore. Is the Browns coaching staff afraid of what might happen if Shedeur Sanders actually gets the ball? Long before Shedeur Sanders ever put on a Browns jersey, there were already whispers that certain corners of the NFL weren't quite sure what to do with someone who carried his background, confidence, and spotlight. Not because of anything he did on the field, but because of what he represents. Shedeur isn't just another rookie quarterback. He's the son of one of the most iconic, polarizing, and era-defining figures in football history. And that legacy comes with deep cultural baggage that stretches back decades. For some coaches and front office veterans who came up in old-school football environments, that connection alone creates tension they'll never admit publicly. Across the league, there are still pockets of traditionalists who quietly resent the flash, swagger, and unapologetic confidence that players like Deion Sanders brought into the sport. That old-school mentality valued silence, conformity, and acting like you've been there before, while Deion
represented a different approach, one built on energy, showmanship, and self-belief. Rumors suggest that more than a few people in NFL front offices still carry echoes of that resentment, even if they'd never say it out loud. And for them, Shedeur isn't just a quarterback prospect. He's a reminder of a football culture they never fully accepted. Insiders have pointed out that some of the resistance toward Shedeur might stem from those generational biases, the idea that confidence equals arrogance, or that a young player with attention should be humbled before being rewarded. It's the type of thinking that quietly influences decision-making, even when coaches insist it's purely about performance. Reports claim that certain staff members privately describe Shedeur as too polished, too brand-ready, or too comfortable in the spotlight, as if those qualities somehow disqualify him rather than elevate the team's energy. But in today's NFL, personality and brand power aren't distractions, they're assets. Yet in Cleveland's conservative football culture, they might be viewed as threats. This generational divide becomes even more obvious when you look at how teammates allegedly react around him. Younger players, especially those who grew up in the social media era, see Shedeur's confidence as normal. They're drawn to it. They respond to it. Older coaches, on the other hand, may interpret the exact same energy as entitlement or showmanship, even when nothing on the field suggests that's true.
It's a cultural mismatch that goes unspoken but hangs in the air like static electricity. A modern quarterback stepping into an environment built by people who still romanticize the league as it looked 30 years ago. And it doesn't help that anything involving the Sanders name automatically attracts attention. Some organizations crave that spotlight. Others avoid it at all costs. Rumors suggest Cleveland leans firmly toward the latter. A player with national buzz doesn't fit neatly into a football culture that prefers keeping things low profile. So instead of embracing the energy Shedeur brings, the organization seems to shrink away from it, almost as if they fear the noise could expose cracks they'd rather keep hidden. What makes this angle so important is that none of it has anything to do with football. It's not about arm strength, timing, or readiness. It's about perception, ego, and discomfort with a new generation of athletes who carry themselves differently. When a franchise makes decisions based on those unspoken biases rather than pure performance, it creates a ceiling over players long before they've had a fair chance to prove themselves. And for Shedeur, that ceiling feels less like caution and more like an invisible barrier built from outdated ideas about how a quarterback should look, act, and rise through the ranks. When Shedeur Sanders finally stepped onto an NFL field for his first real action, it wasn't under ideal circumstances, carefully planned rotations, or a supportive build-up from the coaching staff. It happened because the Browns were out of excuses. The offense had stalled, the turnovers had piled up, and the fan base had reached the point where patience had evaporated. Cleveland didn't turn to Shedeur because they were ready. They turned to him because reality forced their hand. And what followed was a moment that exposed everything the organization had been trying to avoid. The atmosphere shifted the second he jogged onto the field. Teammates locked in. The crowd, even in its frustration, surged with energy. It wasn't about whether he'd light up the scoreboard. It was about the simple idea that something, or someone, finally might. And on those first few drives, Shedeur didn't look overwhelmed or unprepared. He looked calm, poised, collected in a way that didn't match the narrative Cleveland had been selling for months. He made reads with confidence, delivered throws with timing, and carried himself like he belonged. It wasn't perfect football, but it was undeniably competent, which only made the coaching staff's earlier resistance look even more suspicious. But then came the brutal reality check, the moment when the pressure, expectations, and organizational dynamics all collided. Every minor mistake Shedeur made was magnified tenfold. A missed read turned into proof he wasn't ready. A late throw became evidence of inexperience. And instead of adjusting the system to help him settle in, the coaching staff seemed to fall back into their most conservative tendencies, calling plays that boxed him in and stripped away the very creativity he thrives on. It felt less like they were trying to support a young quarterback and more like they were waiting for him to fail. Fans noticed it immediately. Analysts noticed it too. The play calling suddenly became tighter, safer, unusually cautious, as if the staff wanted to minimize the chances he could make a big play. And when the offense stalled late in the game, the coaching staff didn't hesitate to pull him, returning to the same struggling options they had been protecting all season. That decision sent a message louder than any press conference ever could. Shedeur's leash wasn't just short. It wasn't even a leash. It was a tripwire. What made the whole situation even more painful was the reaction afterward. Instead of acknowledging the spark he brought or admitting he handled the moment better than expected, the organization downplayed his performance. Vague comments about development timelines and long-term plans resurfaced, as if they hadn't just witnessed the same flashes of potential the fans saw with their own eyes. It felt like the Browns weren't evaluating him. They were defending a narrative they built long before he took the field. But for Shedeur, that debut revealed something far bigger than stats or outcomes. It showed that he can handle the moment, that he is ready for meaningful reps, and that the ceiling that Cleveland keeps trying to place over him might not be as unbreakable as they hoped. The brutal reality check wasn't about him. It was about the organization being forced to confront a truth they'd been avoiding. If he gets real opportunities, he might expose every flawed decision they've made this season. The longer the Browns refuse to act, the higher the price becomes, and the cracks in the organization are no longer subtle. Every week, Cleveland trots out the same stagnant offense, the same predictable play calling, and the same quarterback struggles. The frustration grows louder. This isn't just a talent issue anymore. It's a credibility crisis. Fans who were once patient and hopeful now feel blatantly ignored, and that betrayal comes with real consequences. Season ticket holders are threatening to walk away. Local businesses that rely on game day traffic are joining the chorus of complaints. And social media has turned into an all-out referendum on the coaching staff's decisions. The message is simple. You can't keep selling trust the process when the process clearly isn't working. Inside the building, the fallout is even more intense. Players who spend every day on the practice field can see the difference between what's happening during the week and what's being put on the field on Sunday. They know when a coaching staff is putting them in position to win, and they know when pride, ego, or stubbornness is getting in the way. According to rumors from team insiders, veterans have grown uneasy watching game after game slip away while a more dynamic option sits unused. But they're trapped. Speaking out publicly risks their careers, and confronting coaches privately has reportedly led to cold responses and tense meetings. This kind of silent tension slowly erodes trust, and once trust fades in a locker room, it rarely comes back.
The coaching staff isn't blind to the pressure either. Every misstep is dissected, every press conference is scrutinized, and every vague comment about development only pours gasoline on the fire. Even analysts who once defended the organization are now questioning whether the refusal to play Shedeur is about football or about protecting reputations. When respected voices start poking holes in the narrative, it becomes harder for the Browns to hide behind generic phrases and scripted answers. The public wants honesty, and the staff continues offering evasions. That mismatch fuels even more anger because it feels like the organization is trying to gaslight its own fan base. And then there are the long-term consequences, which loom even larger. Every game Shedeur doesn't play is a game the franchise loses valuable evaluation time. Every week spent protecting struggling starters is a week stolen from building the future. If Shedeur never gets a real chance, the Browns risk going into the next draft blind, potentially spending a high pick on another quarterback without ever knowing whether the answer was already in their building. That's more than incompetence. That's setting the franchise back years. And if they do draft another quarterback while burying the one they already have, the message to players becomes painfully clear. Performance doesn't matter here. Decisions are made long before the season even begins. Meanwhile, the pressure from fans has transformed into something Cleveland hasn't seen in years: organized resistance. Talk of protests, boycotts, and empty stadium campaigns is becoming louder, not because of a losing record alone, but because supporters feel intentionally shut out of the conversation about their own team. When loyal fans start questioning the franchise's integrity, the damage goes deeper than ticket sales. It hits the identity of the team itself. The Browns have spent years trying to rebuild respectability, and all of that progress is now being jeopardized by an internal fight they refuse to acknowledge. This is the cost of inaction: a fractured locker room, a furious fan base, a damaged organizational reputation, and a future clouded by uncertainty. The team can keep pretending things are under control, but everyone watching, from fans to analysts to players, knows the truth. Something inside Cleveland is broken, and the refusal to let Shedeur Sanders compete isn't just a football decision anymore. It's a self-inflicted wound that grows deeper every week they ignore the problem. The situation surrounding Shedeur Sanders has reached a point where it's no longer just a subplot, a fan-driven debate, or an off-season conversation waiting to happen. It has become the defining storyline of the Browns season. The one issue that exposes the team's deeper flaws, shines a light on the fractures behind closed doors, and forces everyone involved to confront a truth they've been trying to avoid. This franchise is standing at a crossroads, and the choice they make next will shape their trajectory for years. If Cleveland continues down the current path, refusing to play Shedeur, deflecting questions, and doubling down on decisions that clearly aren't producing results, they risk cementing a reputation that has haunted them for decades, a franchise more committed to protecting its own ego than pursuing success. It means admitting that the organization fears change more than failure, fears scrutiny more than competition, and fears being proven wrong more than being proven inadequate. When a team functions this way, progress becomes impossible, and the cycle of resets, rebuilds, and excuses becomes endless. But choosing the alternative, giving Shedeur a fair opportunity, opens a different kind of future. Not one guaranteed to be perfect or immediately successful, but one rooted in movement, energy, and possibility. Playing him doesn't just answer the looming quarterback question. It changes the emotional climate of the franchise. It signals to players that competition is real, to fans that honesty
matters, and to the league that the Browns are willing to challenge their own assumptions. Even if Shedeur struggles, the organization gains clarity. And if he rises to the moment, Cleveland unlocks a potential they've spent years, even decades, chasing without success. What comes next depends on how long the Browns can withstand the pressure pushing against them. Fans aren't easing up. Analysts are no longer giving benefit of the doubt. Players are privately losing patience. And the season itself is shifting into a stage where excuses can't hide behind development timelines or future plans. Soon, the team will reach a point where continuing to bury Shedeur becomes impossible to justify, even for those who've been the most resistant. Once playoff hopes disappear, once the narrative collapses under its own contradictions, the push for meaningful change will only intensify. There's also the looming impact of the next draft, a moment that will force the Browns to confront an uncomfortable question. How can they plan for the future when they refuse to evaluate the present? If Cleveland chooses to chase another quarterback without ever giving Shedeur a real look, they risk repeating the same mistakes that have plagued them for 2 decades. And in a league where the margin for error is razor thin, wasting another season on internal politics instead of genuine evaluation would be catastrophic. The reality is simple. The Browns can't escape this situation by ignoring it. Every week they avoid the decision, the pressure grows. Every game they leave fans without answers, the backlash intensifies. Every moment they treat Shedeur like an afterthought, the organizational cracks widen. Eventually, they'll have to face the inevitable. So what's next? Either Cleveland embraces the challenge, hands the ball to the quarterback fans and teammates believe deserves a real shot, and finally moves toward clarity, or they hold on to the fear, the pride, and the outdated thinking that has held them back for years. One direction offers hope. The other guarantees more of the same. And if there's one thing the Browns fan base has made clear, it's that more of the same is no longer acceptable. At this point, the debate surrounding Shedeur Sanders isn't just a disagreement over who should take the next snap. It has become a mirror reflecting everything the Browns have struggled with for years. The fear of change, the reluctance to embrace new energy, the instinct to protect past decisions at all costs. All of it has converged into one storyline that refuses to fade. And the irony is impossible to miss. The one player who could bring clarity, momentum, and genuine excitement to the franchise is the one being held back the most. Whether intentional or not, the message sent by the organization has been loud and consistent, and fans are no longer willing to accept silence where answers are needed. What's unfolding now is bigger than a quarterback controversy. It's a test of whether Cleveland is capable of growth. A test of whether this franchise can finally break out of the habits that have kept it anchored to disappointment. A test of whether the people in charge are willing to put ego aside and make decisions that actually move the team forward. Because if a young, talented quarterback who energizes the locker room and ignites the fan base can't even earn a fair evaluation, then what hope does the organization have of ever escaping its own history? The truth is, the Browns don't need Shedeur to be perfect. They don't need him to be a savior or a superstar overnight. What they need is honesty.
the honesty to admit that what they're doing now isn't working, and the courage to try something different. Letting him play isn't a gamble. It's the logical step the team hasn't taken. And in a season defined by frustration and wasted potential, giving him that chance could finally turn the page. But if Cleveland chooses to keep him buried, the fallout won't quietly fade. Fans will grow louder, players will grow more frustrated, analysts will grow more critical, and the organization will find itself drowning in a controversy that it created and could have solved with a single decision. In the end, this situation boils down to a simple question the Browns can no longer avoid. Are they willing to see what they really have in Shedeur Sanders, or are they too afraid of what the answer might reveal?